Hello, hello.
Hello.
Hey, Andrea. How are you?
Good, thanks.
Long time no chat. Has been
Yes.
good stuff. I'm happy to be back. Hopefully, I can start joining the meetings again.
Great. That'd be great. So I wrote a note in the channel, unfortunately, today due to some unforeseen circumstances. I need to drop early, so I may be able to be until 4:20.
We can keep it short. Yeah.
But yeah, no, you also can continue after I'm done. Don't have to. Don't want to break the discussion. But yeah, unfortunately, yeah, my wife is not feeling well, so I need to pick up my son from school.
No worries.
If it makes sense, I can share the agenda.
Sure.
While I'm here.
Do we have more people usually joining kind of like these meetings, or not much?
Yeah, we usually do.
Everything seems to be slow, kind of like at the beginning of the year.
Yeah.
People is just getting back to it.
Yeah, usually like Tracy and Steve are joining, Kara joining, Matthias. Emil is, he wrote me that he's not well today, unfortunately, so he won't be joining. Matthias, he just wrote that he's having technical difficulties, but he's trying to join.
Okay.
Eric has problem with internet as well. Who broke the internet today? All right. Shall we get started? Is that all right?
Let's do it.
Okay. So the first thing I just wanted to mention in the agenda, or maybe just should say, okay, welcome to SIG Events Vocabulary Discussion Meeting. Today is January the 25th. And if you like, add your name to the participant list in the agenda. And I hope you have access to the agenda. Otherwise, I'll just put the link in the chat. And yeah, so the first thing I just wanted to put a brief reminder is that we're working with the CF on a marketing PR plan, which I put the link in here. We have some content already, but yeah, review and contribution are very welcome. And of course, one of the things that we benefit from is supporting quotes. So if your company you work for, or you know some company that would like to give a supporting quotes to the SIG Events project, feel free to add it to there. Okay, any question on that?
What's the announcement for? Kind of like what's the?
So the announcement is the SIG Events project, basically.
Okay.
So the SIG Events project has joined the SIG Foundation as an incubating project, and yeah, so we want to make a bit of a splash announcement and spread the word about SIG Events. At the end of the last year, at the leadership summit, there were some discussions as well. I was not there, but Steve and Tracy were there, and they kind of promoted SIG Events, and CDF recognized the events are strategic, so we wanted to put some stress and focus on it, so to say. But we would like to get more contributions to the project, at least in terms of use cases, real life use cases of people using events in their cities, and maybe contributors to the spec and to the SDKs. So that's the background.
Perfect.
Okay, quickly, I wanted to mention the next one. We discussed about setting up a roadmap for the project. It's part of the requirements for incubating project in the CDF. Sorry about my voice. So I created a PR where I proposed a roadmap for this year. And yeah, so I already, sorry, I'm not going to go for it now, but I already got some comment and replied and updated the spec. Sorry, the roadmap a few times. I just wanted to ask if anyone had any thoughts about it, or just ask if you could review so that we can merge it sooner than later, or if there is any concern with the current roadmap. I mean, I
think it's good.
Can you share the link? I would love to take a look. I think that I already looked at it, but just to double check.
Yeah, it's in the agenda.
Okay, let me check. You are not sharing the agenda, you are sharing the spec now. I don't know if that's what you want to share.
So let me go back to the agenda. Can you see the agenda now?
No, it's a browser window showing the spec. The cloud events spec, actually.
I'm sharing the wrong thing. Sorry about that. How do I? Okay, let's share the entire desktop here.
Yes, there we go.
And this is, of course, the Zoom bar won't let me change stuff. Yeah. Okay. So this is the agenda. All right, so it's PR number 9.
Perfect. I will try to add some comments there. Yes.
Thanks, Mauricio. Okay. Yeah. So next we have use cases. So we wanted to basically go through different use cases that we have listed and proposed for POC. If you don't mind, just before we, because I may run out of time, just wanted to say 2 words about the next 2 items in the agenda. Just saying that I created a couple of items for design discussions, which are issues number 10 and 11, if folks are interested and want to release some comment. And the last one, I set up a project, so a GitHub project, and created a 0.1 milestone for the spec. And so I started basically setting up a kind of planning exercise to see what we think should be in scope for the initial version of the spec. Again, I don't want to spend time in this meeting going through the planning, but if folks are interested and want to have a look, then we can discuss it in more details during the SIG meeting next week.
Sounds good.
Okay. All right, so for the use cases, Mauricio, you wanted to present the Knative use case? You want to take over screen sharing? Or
I mean, if you want to open the issue, I think that we can talk about talk about there, yeah. I think that we have we have Ishan here. Hi, Ishan. Do you want to quickly introduce yourself? If you can, of course.
Hey guys, yeah, I'm currently working alongside Mauricio, and basically we're trying to come up with this POC for the Cloud City events. And I'm working as a backend dev right now with Porter, and yeah, mostly into Kubernetes and controller stuff. So
Yeah, and he's doing all kind of like the implementation of the controller here. So I think that the main idea around this is just to create like a Knative controller for that will be able to emit CD events and consume CD events as well. The problem that I see every time that we want to integrate a new project into kind of like using, consuming, and producing CD events is basically usually like we first need to come up with a use case that makes sense and kind of like a couple of tools that can integrate by using kind of, in this case, like cloud events. So we started kind of like based on this issue, kind of like with 2 use cases in mind, and both use cases kind of like include Tekton, because Tekton was already included there in the POC, in the previous POC that we had. We also had like Keptn in the POC, but I think that having Keptn, Tekton, and Knative all together working, it's totally doable, but it might be a little bit bloated to kind of like getting started. So what Ishan is doing now is basically creating a controller that can consume and produce cloud events, and I think that we pretty much have that already, right? Like, and we're using the the CD events SDK, and that's kind of like working. But I think that it was like something that we need to do is we need to come to this group, just share that we are building this and get external feedback so we can actually come up with a POC that maybe we can show in conferences, or maybe that we can use basically to evolve the vocabulary. Because I think that every time that we implement one of these POCs, the vocabulary gets better because we have kind of like real projects using CD events and integrating with other projects. And of course, Tekton is kind of like becoming kind of like it's always there because it's already supporting cloud events, and also kind of like it has the CD extension as well. But I'm more than open to say, okay, let's like bring another project that it's not integrated with the CD events yet, and then just include it kind of like in these kind of like use cases. So yeah, I created this issue. Ishan is creating the implementation. What we need from the group here is just some validation on the use cases, some feedback on the use cases, and then help to set up things together, right? Like the same thing that we did on the PLC for like I don't know, it was like CD Summit and KubeCon, right? And also, like, where do we put it? I mean, if we start coding something, should we kind of like also add it into this repo or somewhere else?
Right. Yeah. Trying to remember, we discussed about where to store POCs. Yeah, we could have. We have not set it up yet, but I think we could have one repo under the CD events organization where we take all the POCs in one place. That's I think what we discussed earlier that we would do. Yeah, and yeah, we can keep permissions pretty lightweight on those. I mean, the alternative is to have one repo per POC, and then who's running the POC have complete ownership of the repo. And but yeah, either way, I think it would be nice to host them in the CD events GitHub org, if that's fine with you.
I think that yeah.
Yeah,
I think that will make sense. If you scroll down a bit more, you will see that I've added kind of like a diagram and the kind of events that kind of like this component will be emitting and consuming. And I've also raised kind of like some questions about like from the consuming side, when basically each implementation will need to define how to map a CD event to an action inside that kind of like specific project or platform. I think that we can come up with a solution for that as well. Maybe not as part of the POC, but I think that for this group, we should be thinking about that. Because one thing is creating a component that emits CD events, that's perfectly fine. But the semantics on consuming CD events and mapping that to specific actions or calling specific endpoints and all that stuff, it's much more fuzzy. And also it pushed me as like an integrator to create custom code to build those kind of like mappings. And that's usually kind of like a big barrier for people trying to adopt this kind of stuff. So maybe we can just follow there like the discussion in the comment, but I'm really curious from hearing kind of like people's thoughts about this kind of stuff, because I do see this you know, as one of the main problems for adopting this stuff, like the CD events in general, not the emitting CD events, but the consuming side of things.
Yeah. Yeah, I think in the initial POC as well, we had some custom code that we had to write for the consuming side. So definitely there is some work to be done. I think what I would love to see is as you work on this and you hit maybe more specific issues for a specific field, that maybe we have a dedicated issues so that we can say, okay, this bit of information, how can we share it, or can we structure the protocol in a way that it serves your use case, and then on the spec side, I would like I started creating some issues because I think I would like to track in the spec itself when we have some description, or we have this field in the protocol, then we can link it back to use cases and say, well, we have this field in the protocol because it serves these use cases, and we have some POCs implemented as well, so we can know that everything that we have in there specified, it has a meaning, and we don't lose track of all these interesting design discussions. So to be honest, I've not read in detail the last comment on this issue yet. So but I'll try to do that as soon as possible.
So as next steps, Andrea and team, I would say that maybe with Ishan, we are going to define kind of like these events and probably go to check if the SDK is already containing kind of like the structures for emitting, for being able to emit and produce these events. And if the SDK doesn't have them, probably we will send some pull requests for that. Is that okay?
Yes, maybe you can, as I said, create some issues
Yeah.
and then the PR associated, so we can have some discussion on it. For the SDK, so right now there is the SDK in SIG Events, as you know, because you wrote it.
Yeah.
So there is we had some discussion in the meanwhile about how we want to do the binding to cloud events, and things may be changing a bit. But I think as you're working actively on this POC, you don't need to wait on that. I think you can work with the SDK as it is now, and then at some point, if we change the binding and rewrite the SDK in the CD events repo org, then you can just swap the SDK, and it shouldn't be hopefully too bad for the POC, because at the end of the fields that you have access to are the same. It's just how they are written into cloud events that may change.
Perfect. Yeah, makes sense. At the same time, we will, as soon as we have like a small POC where we can show kind of like some integration, we will try to donate the controller to the Knative Sandbox organization. So hopefully it's like in Tecton, like an experimental component that the community can pick up and use. And I guess that's where kind of like we might be interested in just showing this to more people, so people is aware that we are working on this, and if somebody else wants to join, they can.
Nice.
When it comes to dealing with how to consume events and take action on it, I wonder if Matthias or Emil at some point have thoughts they can share from the Eiffel community when it comes to that, because there I believe things have matured a bit when it comes to consuming event and taking action on it. Matthias, I'm not sure if you have any comments on that now. Or...
Well, yeah. It was actually interesting to know a little bit more about the consumption and so on. In my head, if I get things right now, the reason that most of the consumption of events is up to the like user itself is because it's the way that you set up the pipeline. So for example, it's not always that you get, if you publish an event, what happens after what happens, for example, if you publish an artifact, what happens after that one is, in my head, up to the user to decide, because that depends on the pipeline they're running. Of course, we can, like have generic pipelines and so on, but that would probably be a generic pipeline and not part of the protocol.
I think that yeah, Matthias, I think that I do agree. But for example, for Knative, for Tekton, for Kepton, it's like each of these tools are kind of like a black box that can perform different actions, right? Like that you can just call services and do certain things and stuff will happen. The thing that I'm noticing is that for every project, you need to do that mapping, but we can just provide kind of like a mapping out of the box to say, if I get, in this case, like, an artifact published, I know that I can just scan my services and see if somebody's consuming that and maybe trigger an automatic update. And I totally understand that that's kind of like related to the pipeline or to the behavior that you're trying to implement, but it still feels like we can provide kind of like an out of the box mechanism that do something for you. Like defining, okay, this is a black box that has kind of like these inputs, and then, these are the events that are going to be produced when we create resources. And maybe that's true, like that's just the default behavior, but at least there is something where you don't really need to go and write something from scratch.
Yeah, I mean, if you have, for example, a Knative starting a component, then of course they will listen for published events for Docker containers, and then you would probably deploy those. So in that case, it makes sense to have something out of the box. If you follow my train of thought there.
Yeah. I think that's kind of like one of the use cases that we want to implement, but it still feels like we will just hit this problem again and again, and it's not clear, like the semantics of the events from the consuming side of things, they are not as clear as from the producer side of things, right? Like it's pretty clear to me what Knative, like what are the events that Knative can produce, but it's not clear to me with the current events that we have defined, which are the events that Knative should be interested in, if you know what I mean, which push you to that kind of like other side of saying, okay, just use the SDK and just write your own crazy thing. You can listen to whatever you want, to be honest, and then execute whatever you want inside Knative, which is pretty broad and pretty generic.
Yeah. So thinking loud a little bit. So in one thing, when we define events, I'm thinking about the cloud event spec. I should probably paste a link also to what I'm reading. So here, and this is the event part, sorry. I should have linked directly to that one. Where an event is a data record expressing an occurrence and its context. So basically, when we send events, we basically only like tell what has happened.
Exactly. Yep.
So what you're talking about is basically describing of what should happen after you've received something.
Yes, that's why I don't think that should be events, but it's pretty related with what this group is doing in some way. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I totally understand what you mean, and that's why I'm having kind of like troubles explaining kind of like the problem. But I think that, for example, the cloud events kind of like team, like the working group, they also spend some time creating kind of like registries and that kind of stuff, where we can say something like, Knative serving is interested in these events, and you can explicitly put that somewhere. Even, even if there is no mapping there, at least we can say, okay, Knative eventing is going to wait for these kind of events, and then it's going to do something by default. If you don't want to do that, then you can code your own thing. But I guess that we should explore that area as well.
Yeah. So that's more like a description of like a service description of what events does this service support.
Something like that, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that could be something. At least when you're browsing, if you're, for example, browsing a bunch of components on here, they would help you to know, okay, if I what does this service support for events? So that would help you.
Yeah, and I think that that's really related with the vocabulary sections that we have. because when I was like creating the issue, I noticed that, for example, Knative serving can produce events from the continuous deployment pipeline, kind of like core bucket that we defined. And it is kind of like clear to me also that we can consume events from the continuous integration pipeline, kind of like bucket. So there is a correlation there that we can say something like, this component is more on the deployment side, and it's going to emit these events, and also it's going to consume, or it's going to be interested in these events by default, right? And that might be kind of like the way for us to describe the default behavior of the component, and then you can just extend that by using the SDK. Mm-hmm. So just food for thought. It's like not proposing any solution right here, but I think that that's something that we should experiment for building a little bit more advanced use cases and POCs.
Yeah. So I hope I'm not sidetracking now, but Eric, you were part of Interrupt SIG last week. We discussed pull requests from Mary something. Marie.
Anne-Marie Fred.
Yeah, Anne-Marie Fred. Who's working at Red Hat, I think, where she's starting to define terms for pipeline stages and pipeline steps. Maybe I should try to find that PR, where she's kind of like, okay, this is input to a step and this is an output to a step. I don't know if that's something that we're discussing here, maybe.
It is, I think that it is related. So yeah, I feel we should definitely try to get into that conversation as well.
So let me find.
I think I'm sharing it now.
Oh yeah, you are. Thank you.
My internet is a bit slow apparently, but here we go. Can I go? No. Just open the file. What? Tricky. Anyway,
Can you do the richness?
Maybe I can. I'm not really sure what I'm doing. I would like to see it in rendered mode. There we go. Okay, that was easy. Yeah, so basically defining all these different steps that we could have. This is really slow. Where are we? There we go. Yeah, so set up downloading source, tagging, detecting if there are secrets in the code, etc., etc. So we have been discussing, like, do we have concrete activity events or abstract activity events? If we want to have concrete events for all this, we have a lot of events, but I mean, that could be possible as well. But it could at least help, as we were discussing, help services and tools that want to react to these events understand what types of events could be sent. And of course, there would be a mapping then between this and what actual CD events we send for these pipeline steps or stages. I guess that's what was what you were referring to, Matthias.
Yeah, precisely. So, for example, there is some deploy stage, I think, further down, or provision, deploy or provision here. Maybe it's something like this that we're actually discussing in Knative.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think so. Yeah. Deploys and provision, yeah. And verify deployment maybe as well. And yeah, so we're going to be meeting events around all this stuff. The problem is, again, on the consuming side of things. How do we define those semantics? And those might not be events, as you mentioned. It's not an event what we are defining. It's more just, it's kind of like the events that we're interested in to perform certain actions. So it's that kind of like event action mapping.
Yeah.
Anyways, yeah,
but it sounds interesting what you're discussing. I was just referring back to this. So for example, in deploy here, if we would, for example, define deploy is you listen for these events and you send these events. then you at least would have that mapping, and we call that deploy. You would have something more than just listen for any event. So it's a little bit more defined.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that sounds good. Yeah. Yeah, because in deploy you have inputs, right?
Yeah, precisely. It says input, software sources, binary, and so on.
Okay,
and there
so
we could basically fill in, okay, what events would it be input?
perfect. Yeah, I think that sounds good.
Huh?
Yeah, it sounds good.
Good. We got
Sounds
some
like
correlation
the way
with
to
that
go.
one.
Perfect. Folks, I need to drop because I have another meeting, but thank you very much. I think that Ishan, we should be joining these meetings from time to time so we can show some progress. Do you have any other thing that you want to share?
Sure, like you can join the further meetings that we have. Nothing more from my side to share.
Awesome work, by the way. Great
Thank
stuff.
you. Thanks, guys.
Okay, folks.
Nice. Yeah, thanks for joining.
Thank you.
So should we spend some time? I'm not sure what these issues are actually. That Andrea linked in. Link produced events to consumed events. So this might be related to the. I wonder if this is the same type of linking that Eiffel has.
I'm not too sure.
Should allow propagating.
I only spent a couple of minutes to read it, so I can't say 100% sure that it's the same thing.
When an activity is directly started as a consequence of a consumed CD event, an identifier of the consumed event must be included in the produced events related to the activity. This is I think, quite similar to what Eiffel does with its cause link.
Yeah, precisely. This is a cause link.
Yes. I have a question there. We have a similar concept, not in events yet, but that we're working on in our platform, and that is we define a starting point for a pipeline. And at that starting point, we create a unique identifier, and that unique identifier is always available throughout every message that is sent as part of that pipeline. I wonder if this is the same as flow context in Eiffel. Because flow context is basically created once in the beginning when you sort of do the first thing in a flow, right?
Yeah, and then you refer to that flow context with the rest of the events.
Yeah. But here I think this would be more like the cause link, I believe.
I guess so. So there is a source. If we take a look at the blob down there, but they also see the events source, and I didn't really get that one.
This seems like it's a combination of the ID and the source from previous message. So those two together would form this source event. Because if you look at the formats, the first part looks very much like an ID, and the later part looks very much like a source.
Yeah, that's a source event. Yeah, and then there is event source, 2 steps up.
Yeah, and that I think. Oh, that's a good question. What the heck is this? Right. Okay, then I was mistaken. So what is this part then? Then this is not. This is not the.
Well, that could be the previous one.
I thought.
I think you were correct there, actually.
Because now
okay. Is that the source of the producer?
I have to read here, I think. So globally unique source. I hear it as a format. So SIG event platform plus, so it's either serialized source plus ID or platform plus source and ID or just source. This is confusing to me. I have to read this on my own at some point, I think, to understand it.
But I think that the 3 new ones that they've introduced there, that's the link basically in our world. So basically, yeah, not everyone knows Eiffel, but in Eiffel we have links, so we can link to other events. And then we have a link type, and then we have basically just an ID that is the ID field to the previous event. We have recently introduced a domain, so you know where this came from. But here it seems like we have basically we have an ID and we also have a source. But then you also have this SIG event source, which I guess is a specification of where this one was. So I think that you look in the previous events and take that source and put that in SIG event source.
Yeah,
that's my take from it.
One thing that I'm missing from Eiffel, not from a functionality perspective, but just from a understanding what the heck is going on perspective, is I would sort of like the type of event that was the cause of whatever I'm doing to be included as well. So here where we have the type of the event that we're sending, but I would like the event that we reacted on as well. Like, did we start from something being deployed, or did we start from a source change or something like that? That's overkill from a functionality perspective, because if you have a database with all events, all you really need is this part, and you can find exactly what you're looking for. So the event type would be just as a human trying to understand what's going on. So I will make a comment on it, but I will not complain too loudly if it doesn't get in there.
Yeah, I get the point for type. I guess the link type gives a little bit more information because then in so again, I'm referring back to Eiffel. Sorry for those who are not comfortable with it. We have link types on the Eiffel describing, and those link types. It depends on, not all link types are valid between all events. So by looking at the link type, you can actually see what event we're actually dealing with.
I'm thinking like here for cause, we have legal targets any. So this could literally be any event. And the only way you can figure out what type of event it was is by following that identifier into some database or some service that has all the events and asking it what type of event was this.
Okay, yeah. So you're thinking of having something more human readable to help you there.
Yes, but that would literally only help those who are just looking at the raw events, and no one will be using that or will be doing that in a functional system. Then they will always go through this database that has all the events, and that will of course tell you exactly what it was. So I think, yeah, maybe it is something that we could have that could be turned off somehow. We could use it for when we ourselves are like building things, and then we can turn it off in production.
Yeah, that's always on a data race. But yeah.
How do I remember to write a note without writing it now? I will take a note of it. How do I move the Zoom window? There we go. So here. No, come back. Erik to add a note on sending type of course event. Yes. But yeah, I guess it's open to everyone to go in here and comment on Andreas' proposal. Yeah, we could have a quick look on the other one as well to see what that is about. Subject. I wonder if subject is a mandatory field in CloudWinds. Do we know that?
I can take a look. Required attributes are ID, source, spec version, and type. Subject is not mandatory. It's optional.
Okay. Yeah. I wonder what does Cloud Events themselves say that subject is about? Spec version optional.
There.
Something about being useful for filtering scenarios. So you can understand where an event should go without looking into the data, maybe. Yeah, but then Andrea definitely has a point that we need to document how we want to use the subject, if we want to use it at all, and if so, how we do it.
And the idea is to, okay, that was only an example.
So is this, I wonder if this is something, this seems a bit related to this flow context that we talked about before, but it might be on a more granular level. So I wonder if this could be something like a Jenkins job or something, or what this, or in this case, a Tecton one, I guess.
So in his example, he has this as the ID of the task run. Is it the ID of the job, or is it?
It's a good question. Yeah, I think probably, we probably shouldn't spend too much time trying to understand what Andrea is after when he's not here. But we could do this, and that we put our comments in this in these two issues and let Andrea clarify things. But I mean, both of them seem reasonable to me. Definitely connecting events together, like we had in the other, which I lost it. But yeah, is very helpful. Because then I think we saw that already in the PE that like Captain wanted us, or Captain wanted to have some sort of, it was like a context. I think it was called Captain context.
Yeah, they wanted to have some
yeah,
trace context. I think they wanted it.
Yes, something like that.
But I prefer to have the previous event only like one step back.
I don't disagree. I'm just wondering why is that better, just for my understanding.
So if I got the idea from Captain, they want to have a context that follows the whole chain through. So you basically have one context, like you said, you created an ID or something, and that was part of the whole entire flow. So they wanted to create a context and then I think it's using that context to group all the events together. But in my head, at least, it becomes a problem if you're doing fanning and fan outs. We have created an example of that one in the use case page on the Hacky MD document, the use case page of a fan situation, which we don't really see how you can map that in. But if you just have one step back, you can handle those scenarios.
Because I was about to say that the reason in my head for why I would like to have a shared context is for the fan out and fan in. So that would be a very easy way to differentiate. So say that I have two instances of the same pipeline running in parallel, and they both reach the fan out point. So they both start running a bunch of activities parallel, and at some point I want to fan in again. And to very easily be able to determine, so like this deploy thing that was finished that I need to wait for, was that part of my fan out or was it some other one's fan out? And the way I would do that is I would require all the fanning things to share the same context identifier that I have. So I will ignore anyone that has a different context identifier because that was not part of my fan out. But of course, it could also be checked by step tracing back until I reach the fan out point by looking at previous events and previous events and previous events. That would also be possible, and it's probably safer. But fanning, yeah.
Okay, so for you, it was you want to get the which events are grouped together, basically.
Exactly. Yes. I guess it would be the same as flow context in Eiffel. So which events belong to the same flow context.
Yeah, that's interesting. So I pasted a link there to the use case document.
So I'm going to go ahead and open it.
And if you go to the picture view or the eye there.
Oh, nice.
So here, for example, we have this is a situation where you have a bunch of like libraries integrating into other libraries and then projects, and then you have consuming projects here. And in this situation, we don't know where we would use a context, but here we see we need to have links in order to because it's very hard to say, okay, which context should, for example, the pipeline for library 3, should I have libraries 1 or libraries 2 context and so on?
Yeah, that's a very good point. I think when I'm talking about fan out and fan in, it was probably something that would happen inside this pipeline. So this pipeline starts, and then internally it decides, yeah, for efficiency's sake, I can do these 3 things in parallel, but I don't want to continue until all these 3 things are done. And then if you have like one instance of library 3 project pipeline starting because library 1 project pipeline is done, and another starting because library 2 project pipeline is done, you don't want to, because now you have 6 activities running in parallel, 3 in one group and 3 in the other. And you want to make sure that when you wait for something to fan in, they actually have to come from the same group. And that is where that context makes things a little bit simpler. But of course, you could also do it by tracing backwards. By looking at parent events or source events until you reach the common starting or reach the fan out point.
In that situation, yeah, so I get both ideas, but I hope I'm not sounding like I'm trying to cut myself now, but it feels more logical to have some kind of that the events coming from one pipeline will have some kind of common identifier, so you listen for them.
I think it's simply a different aspect of fan out and fan ins.
Yeah. But do please, if you have some time, you can sketch a simple picture of that scenario.
Yes, I will take a note of that.
And put it there, because that would be good. Because then we have something more to discuss also.
Yeah. Yes, yeah, that's good. That's good, because this both, or if they are different types of fan in and fan out, which I think, then both are things that need to be considered and would be interesting to have.
Yeah,
nice.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Good.
So, is there anything more we would like to go through today? I think, as I said, not too much point digging deep into these issues when Andrea is not here, but we can instead do homework and prepare some questions for him that he can answer later.
Yeah. Did you go through the last link? I was late into the meeting because I have some technical issues.
No, we didn't actually go through it. Andrea just mentioned it, and he said he didn't feel that we needed to go through it, but or that he didn't need to go through it because he had not so much time. But this is basically it. So this, I haven't used this part of GitHub before, but it's part of some project planning type thing. So these are what's in mind for version 0.1. Yeah, like the first milestone. We did add, I'm not sure if you were here for that, Matthias, but I have requested that we also add a Python SDK, because I think at least, or we on our side are willing to help build that, or maybe even do all the work. We will need a Python binding for it. So yeah, and Andrea has added that to the roadmap now. It doesn't necessarily need to go into the v0.1, but it's part of the 2022 roadmap.
Yeah.
So that's good.
Yeah. Just thinking out loud here, we talked about how the events are shuffled, putting data inside the data object and not in the root.
Yes. Yeah.
Is that part of V1, or should we take that later?
I think this is related to that.
Okay. My bad.
So we can look at that to see what it says. Yeah, so right now we have everything on top level, but this would be putting it inside data and then also sending together data schema. So this doesn't cover the whole thing, but it's very related to it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, exactly.
Good.
Oops, too many tabs. Where is my back button? But nice. Yeah, so if there's nothing else for today, then I suggest that we wrap up and try to have a look at these issues and roadmap on our own time.
Sounds a good idea.
Okay, then yeah, have a great day, everyone, and talk to you soon.
See ya.
See ya.